The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were carved from the bones of dead moons, polished until they shone like black mirrors. 12 species had built this place together. Back when cooperation meant survival and unity meant strength, now it served as a monument to their power. The elder races gathered here to decide the fate of worlds, to draw borders across star systems, and to remind themselves that they had conquered the darkness between the stars. On this day, the chamber was nearly empty. Only a handful of junior officials worked at their stations, monitoring the endless flow of data that kept the galaxy running. Trade routes, military movements, resource allocations, the same information that had flowed through this room for thousands of years. Nothing ever changed. Nothing ever surprised them anymore. Kethan was young for a Morvani, barely to 100 years old. His scales were still bright green, not yet faded to the gray that came with age and wisdom. He had been assigned to the Deep Space Monitoring Division 6 months ago, and in all that time, he had never reported anything more interesting than a comet changing course. His job was to watch the edges of known space, the places where civilization ended and the void began. It was boring work, safe work, the kind of assignment they gave to people who would never matter. He almost missed it. The signal was faint, buried in the background radiation of a region called the Hollow Expanse. No one lived there. No one could live there. 3,000 years ago, a war between two forgotten species had turned that entire sector into a graveyard of radiation and debris. Ships that entered did not return. Probes sent to map the region simply stopped transmitting. The Council had declared it a dead zone and forbidden travel through it. There was nothing there worth finding, but something was moving through it now. Kethan ran the scan twice, then 3 times. Each time, the result was the same. A massive object, larger than anything in the Council's fleet registry, was traveling through the hollow expanse at speeds that should have been impossible. It was not following any known trade route. It was not responding to any navigation beacons. It was simply moving, steady and silent, like a predator that did not need to hurry because it knew its prey could not escape. He flagged the anomaly and sent it up the chain of command. Within an hour, it had been dismissed. Senior analysts reviewed his data and concluded that it was a sensor ghost, an echo caused by the strange radiation in that sector. They told him to recalibrate his equipment and stop wasting their time. Kethan did as he was told. He was too junior to argue, but he kept watching. 3 days later, the object changed course. It turned away from its original heading and began moving directly toward Council space. The senior analysts could not explain that away. Emergency protocols activated for the first time in 800 years. The Council was summoned. Ambassador Voroth of the Sindari arrived first, as he always did. His species had dominated galactic politics for the last 5,000 years, ever since they had crushed the last empire foolish enough to challenge them. They were tall and powerful, with forearms and skin like burnished copper. Their military was the largest in known space. Their economy controlled half of all trade. When Voroth spoke, the other species listened. He did not look worried as he took his seat at the great circular table. He looked annoyed. "I was told this was urgent," he said, his voice deep and rough. "I see no emergency here. Only a room full of frightened children jumping at shadows." The other ambassadors filed in one by one. The Morvani, the Tessek, the Vrilani, and the Korath. 12 species, 12 seats, 12 voices that together decided the fate of trillions. They settled into their places and waited for the briefing to begin. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the table. It showed a star map of the region around the hollow expanse, with a single red dot marking the position of the unknown object. As they watched, the dot moved, creeping steadily closer to the border of Council space. "We have confirmed the contact," the briefing officer said. She was a Tessek, her crystalline body catching the light as she moved. "It is not a sensor ghost. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is a vessel of some kind, though its design matches nothing in our databases." "How large?" asked Ambassador Kellis of the Vrilani. The briefing officer hesitated. "Initial estimates suggest a length of over 3 kilometers. We have since revised that estimate upward. Current projections indicate the vessel may be closer to 4 kilometers in length, possibly larger." Silence fell over the chamber. The largest ship in the Sindari fleet, the pride of their armada, was barely 2 kilometers long. A vessel of the size being described should not exist. The resources required to build such a thing would bankrupt most civilizations. This is absurd. Voroth said, "No species in this galaxy has the capability to construct something of that scale. Your sensors are malfunctioning. We have verified the readings with 17 independent arrays." The briefing officer replied, "The data is accurate. Then explain it." "I cannot, Ambassador. We have no explanation." Voroth slammed one of his fists against the table. "Unacceptable. I will not sit here and listen to ghost stories. Send a scout squadron to investigate. Get me real information, not speculation and fear." The council agreed. What else could they do? 6 scout ships were dispatched to intercept the unknown vessel and make contact. They were fast and well-armed, crewed by experienced officers who had served the council for decades. They would find answers. They found death instead. The first ship to reach the contact point transmitted for 11 seconds before its signal cut out. In that time, it sent back a single image, a dark shape against the stars, so large that it filled the entire frame. There were no visible weapons, no shields, no engines that the sensors could identify, just a wall of black metal, scarred and pitted as if it had traveled through the heart of a sun and survived. The second ship lasted 8 seconds. The third managed to transmit a partial scan before it vanished. The skin showed armor plating of unknown composition, several meters thick, covering a hull that seemed to absorb sensor beams rather than reflect them. The fourth and fifth ships did not transmit at all. The sixth tried to retreat. Its final message was 3 words: "They're already here." Kethan was still at his station when the last signal died. He had been watching from the beginning, following the progress of the scouts with growing dread. He was young and inexperienced, but he was not stupid. He could see what was happening even if his superiors refused to admit it. Something was coming. Something powerful. Something that had been hiding in the dead spaces of the galaxy, in the places where no one thought to look. And now it had decided to reveal itself. The council chamber was in chaos. Ambassadors shouted at each other, demanding answers that no one could provide. Voroth called for a military response, insisting that the Sindari fleet could destroy any threat if given the order. Others urged caution, arguing that they knew nothing about what they were facing. How could they fight an enemy they did not understand? "We should attempt communication," Ambassador Kellis said. "We have not even tried to speak with them. Perhaps they are not hostile. Perhaps the loss of our scouts was a misunderstanding." 6 ships do not vanish because of a misunderstanding, Voroth growled. "This is an act of war. War against whom? We do not even know who they are. Does it matter? They have attacked us. They must be punished." The argument raged on for hours. Meanwhile, the unknown vessel continued its approach. It did not accelerate. It did not slow down. It moved at the same steady pace, as if it had all the time in the universe, as if it knew that nothing in its path could stop it. Kethan watched the tracking data update on his screen. At its current speed, the vessel would reach the Nexus system in less than 3 days. The Nexus was the heart of the Council, home to the great station where the ambassadors met, where the treaties were signed, where the laws were made. If the unknown vessel wanted to send a message, there was no better target. He thought about what he had seen in that brief transmission from the first scout ship. The image had been grainy and distorted, but he had studied it carefully, enhancing it as much as his equipment allowed. The vessel was not just large, it was ancient. The scars on its hull were not from recent battles. They were old wounds, healed over by time and repair. Layer upon layer of damage and recovery that spoke of centuries of conflict. Whoever had built this ship had been fighting for a very long time, and they had survived. Kethan did not know if that made him feel better or worse. On one hand, it suggested that the builders were not mindless destroyers. They had not simply smashed everything in their path. They had endured. They had learned. On the other hand, it meant that they had faced enemies before and defeated them. What chance did the Council have against something that had been waging war since before their civilizations existed? The hours passed. The vessel drew closer, and the Galactic Council, for all its power and wisdom and 12,000 years of history, could do nothing but wait and watch and wonder what was coming for them. When the unknown ship finally reached the edge of the Nexus system, it stopped. It did not attempt to approach the station. It did not open fire. It simply hung there in the darkness, a shadow among the stars, waiting. The Council sent a message. The data appeared on the main display, scrolling across the screen in columns of numbers and diagrams. At first, it was difficult to understand. The human notation SIS. The data appeared on the main display, scrolling across the screen in columns of numbers and diagrams. At first, it was difficult to understand. The human notation SIS data crystal changed everything. Within hours, every military analyst on the Council station had reviewed its contents. Within days, the information had spread to the home worlds of all 12 species. The galaxy now knew what humanity had built in the darkness, and the knowledge settled over them like a shadow. Ambassador Voroth had not slept since the meeting. He sat in his private quarters, surrounded by holographic displays showing different angles of the human vessel. His military advisors had given him their assessment, and it had shaken him to his core. The Prometheus Rising was not simply powerful, it was overwhelming. A single ship of that class could engage the entire Sindari fleet and win. It would suffer damage, certainly. It might even be destroyed eventually, but it would take most of their civilization with it, and the humans had said they had more. Voroth was not used to feeling fear. His species had dominated this region of space for 5,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed rivals, and built an empire that stretched across 100 star systems. No one challenged the Sindari. No one dared. But these humans were different. They had watched from the shadows for centuries, learning, growing, preparing. They had seen the Sindari at their strongest and had not been impressed. They had built weapons that made the mightiest warships in the galaxy look like toys, and they had done it all without anyone knowing they existed. That was what frightened Voroth the most, not the power of their ships, but the patience of their planning. An enemy that could wait 200 years before revealing themselves was an enemy that thought in terms of centuries. They did not make decisions based on anger or pride. They calculated, they prepared. They struck only when they were certain of victory. The door to his quarters chimed. Voroth waved his hand, and it slid open to reveal his chief military advisor, a grizzled veteran named Toroth who had served the Empire for 300 years. "You have seen the reports," Voroth said. It was not a question. Toroth nodded. He looked older than Voroth had ever seen him, as if the weight of the data crystal had aged him overnight. "I have studied them extensively. My staff has run every simulation we can imagine. And we cannot win a direct confrontation, not with our current forces, perhaps not with 10 times our current forces." Toroth moved to stand beside his commander, staring at the holographic display of the human ship. "Their technology is generations ahead of ours. Their armor, their weapons, their shield systems. We do not even understand the principles behind half of what they have shown us. Then we must find their weaknesses. Every enemy has weaknesses. If they have weaknesses, they did not include them in the data they provided. And I suspect that was intentional." Toroth turned to face Voroth directly. "They want us to know how powerful they are. They want us to be afraid. Why? What do they gain from our fear, compliance? They did not come here to fight. If they wanted war, they would have started shooting the moment they arrived. Instead, they requested a diplomatic audience. They showed us their strength. They are trying to convince us that resistance is futile." Voroth slammed his fist against the wall. "I will not bow to these creatures. I will not let the Sindari become servants of some primitive species from an unknown world." "Then what do you propose?" Voroth was silent for a long moment. His mind raced through possibilities, searching for an advantage, a strategy, anything that might give them leverage against the humans. Finally, he spoke. "We must form a coalition. The other species fear us, but they will fear the humans more. We must convince them that their only hope for survival is to stand together against this new threat. The Council will not agree to such an alliance easily. Many of them have suffered under Sindari rule. They may see the humans as liberators rather than invaders. Then we must change their minds. We must make them understand that the humans are not their friends. No species builds weapons of that magnitude without intending to use them. Today they threaten us. Tomorrow they will threaten everyone. Toroth considered this. It could work. Fear is a powerful motivator, but we must move quickly. Before the humans consolidate their position, Voroth nodded. Arrange a private meeting with the other military powers. The Koroth, the Tessek, perhaps the Morvani. Keep it secret from the humans. We will build our coalition in the shadows, just as they built their empire. While Voroth plotted in his quarters, Captain Vasquez was walking through the corridors of the council station. She had been given guest quarters near the diplomatic wing, comfortable but closely monitored. She did not mind the surveillance. She had expected it. Her two companions walked beside her, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Commander James Chen was her second in command, a quiet man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo was their communications specialist, fluent in 17 languages and capable of learning more within hours. They had served together for 15 years, through wars and disasters and moments that had nearly broken them. There were no people in the galaxy that Vasquez trusted more. The Sindari are planning something, Chen said quietly. Their ambassador has been meeting with the other military powers. Private meetings, encrypted communications. Vasquez smiled. Of course he has. We gave him no choice. You wanted him to form a coalition against us? I wanted him to try. It will fail, but the attempt will reveal who our real enemies are. Okonkwo frowned. And who are our friends? That remains to be seen. But I have some ideas. They turned a corner and found themselves in a wide observation gallery overlooking one of the station's many gardens. Alien plants from a dozen worlds grew in carefully maintained plots, tended by automated systems that had been working for thousands of years. It was beautiful, Vasquez thought, a reminder that not everything in this galaxy was about power and conflict. A figure stood at the far end of the gallery, looking out at the garden. It was Ambassador Callis, her Vrilani form catching the artificial sunlight. She turned as the humans approached, and her expression was difficult to read. Captain Vasquez, she said, I hoped I might find you here. Ambassador, a pleasant surprise, is it? I suspect you knew exactly where I would be. Your species seems to have a talent for knowing things. Vasquez inclined her head, acknowledging the point. We have had a long time to watch and learn. Forgive us if we seem presumptuous. Presumptuous is not the word I would use. Kellis gestured toward the garden. Walk with me. They walked in. Silence for a few minutes, following a winding path through the alien plants. Chen and Okonkwo kept their distance, giving the two leaders privacy while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. I have studied the data you provided, Kellis said finally. My analysts tell me it is genuine. Your ship is exactly as powerful as you claim. We have no reason to lie about such things. No, you do not. Kellis stopped beside a flowering bush that glowed with soft blue light. But that raises a question that has troubled me. Since our meeting, if you are as powerful as you say, why? Reveal yourselves now. Why not simply conquer us? Vasquez considered the question carefully before answering. Because conquest is not our goal. We did not build the Prometheus Rising to rule the galaxy. We built it to protect ourselves and to protect others. Protect others from what? From species like the Sindari. Vasquez turned to face the ambassador directly. You know what they have done. You have seen the reports that never reached the public archives. The civilizations they have absorbed, the species they have erased from history. The Council knows all of this, and it does nothing. Kellis was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. The Council is not as unified as it appears. Some of us have tried to stop the Sindari, but they are too powerful. We cannot oppose them openly without risking destruction. That is why we are here. Humanity has no interest in ruling this galaxy. We have our own worlds, our own concerns, our own problems to solve. But we will not stand by while innocent species are enslaved or destroyed. If the Council cannot protect them, we will. You would go to war with the Sindari, if necessary. But I hope it will not come to that. Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That is why I showed them the data. I want them to understand that war with humanity would be a war. They cannot win. I want them to choose peace because the alternative is unthinkable. Kellis nodded slowly. And if they choose war anyway, Then we will finish what they start." The words hung in the air between them. Somewhere in the garden, a bird-like creature sang a melody that neither of them recognized. "There are others who share my views," Kellis said finally. "Smaller species, weaker species, those who have suffered under Sindari rule. If you truly mean what you say about protecting the innocent, you will find allies among them." "I was hoping you would say that. But you must understand something, Captain. Trust does not come easily in this galaxy. You are new, unknown, and terrifyingly powerful. Many will see you as simply a different kind of threat. You will have to prove yourselves. We are prepared to do that." Kellis studied her for a long moment, as if trying to see through her eyes into the mind behind them. Finally, she nodded that double quotes, "Then perhaps there is hope after all." The council chamber had never been so full. Every seat was occupied, every gallery packed with observers and officials and representatives from 100 worlds. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a blade. 3 days had passed since the human delegation had arrived, and in that time, the galaxy had begun to fracture. Ambassador Voroth stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms raised in a gesture of command. Behind him sat the representatives of 6 other species, all military powers, all bound together by fear and self-interest. They had formed their coalition in secret, as Voroth had planned. Now they were ready to reveal it. "Fellow members of the council," Voroth began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We face a threat unlike any we have encountered before. A new species has appeared at our borders, armed with weapons of unimaginable power, making demands and accusations against the established order. They claim to come in peace, but their actions speak louder than their words." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled ambassadors. 6 of our scout ships were destroyed without warning. 6 crews, hundreds of lives, ended in an instant. The humans have offered no explanation, no apology, no compensation for this act of aggression. Instead, they show us their weapons and expect us to be impressed. Captain Vasquez sat at the far end of the chamber, watching the performance with calm detachment. She had expected this. Voroth was predictable, like all tyrants. When faced with a power he could not control, he would try to destroy it. When that failed, he would try to isolate it. She was curious to see how far he would go. "I propose that the council take immediate action." Voroth continued, "We must demand that the humans withdraw from our space. We must insist that they submit to inspection and regulation, like any other species seeking to join the galactic community. And we must prepare ourselves for the possibility that they will refuse." "And if they refuse?" Ambassador Kellis asked. Her voice was steady, but Vasquez could see the tension in her crystalline form. "What then?" "Then we must be prepared to defend ourselves. The coalition I represent has assembled a combined fleet of over 2,000 vessels. We have the strength to challenge any aggressor, even one with technology as advanced as the humans claim." A murmur ran through the chamber. 2,000 ships was an enormous force, the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the Council. It represented the combined military might of nearly half the galaxy. If such a force could not defeat the humans, nothing could. But Vasquez knew better. She had run the simulations. She knew exactly what 2,000 ships would accomplish against the Prometheus Rising and its sister vessels. The answer was simple. They would die. They would fight bravely, perhaps even inflict some damage, but in the end, they would be swept away like leaves in a hurricane. She almost felt sorry for them. Ambassador Moroth of the Tessek rose from his seat. His crystalline body glowed with agitation, a sign of deep emotional stress. Ambassador Voroth speaks of defense, but his words sound like preparation for war. "I must remind this council that we have no proof the humans destroyed our scouts. We have only the absence of transmissions. There could be other explanations, such as?" Voroth demanded. "I do not know, but I am not willing to condemn an entire species based on speculation." Moroth turned to face Vasquez. "Captain, what can you tell us about the fate of the scout ships?" Vasquez rose slowly, feeling every eye in the chamber turned toward her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she could reveal what humanity truly knew and what they truly intended. "The scout ships were not destroyed by human weapons," she said. They were caught in the residual radiation fields of the hollow expanse, the same radiation that makes that region impassable for conventional vessels. Your ships entered a zone of lethal exposure, and they paid the price for it. Voroth's face twisted with anger. You expect us to believe that? You expect us to believe that 6 military vessels, crewed by experienced officers, simply flew into a radiation field and died? I expect you to check the records. Your own sensor logs will confirm what I am saying. The scout ships received warnings about the radiation levels. They ignored those warnings and continued their approach. We did not fire a single shot. Then why did you not warn them? Why did you not tell them to turn back? We tried. Our communications were not compatible with your systems. By the time we adjusted our frequencies, it was too late. Vasquez paused. We regret the loss of life, but we did not cause it. The chamber fell silent. Several of the ambassadors were consulting with their aides, checking the sensor logs, verifying the human captain's claims. Voroth stood frozen, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling around him. This proves nothing. He said finally, even if the scouts died from radiation, the humans still represent a threat. Their weapons, their secrecy, their arrogance. They cannot be trusted. Trust must be earned, Vasquez agreed. We understand that. We did not come here expecting you to welcome us with open arms. But we also did not come here to be condemned without evidence. She stepped forward, moving toward the center of the chamber. The guards along the walls tensed, but she ignored them. She had something more important to say. Ambassador Voroth speaks of defense. But let us be honest about what he truly fears. He does not fear human aggression. He fears human justice. Voroth's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means that humanity has been watching this galaxy for 200 years. We have seen everything. The conquests, the enslavements, the massacres. We know what the Sindari have done to maintain their power. We know about the species they have erased from history, the civilizations they have crushed, the billions of lives they have ended or ruined. She reached into her pocket and produced a small data crystal, identical to the one she had given them before. This contains evidence. Names, dates, locations, documentation of every crime the Sindari have committed since we began observing them. Trade in enslaved populations, biological warfare against civilian targets, assassination of political leaders who resisted their expansion. It is all here. The chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors shouted over each other, demanding explanations, denying accusations, calling for order. Voroth stood at the center of the storm, his face a mask of fury. You lie. He roared, these are fabrications, nothing more. Then let the council examine the evidence. Let independent investigators verify our claims. If we are lying, they will find nothing. But if we are telling the truth, then the galaxy will know what kind of species has been leading it for the past 5,000 years. Voroth turned to his coalition partners, but they were already pulling away. The Korath ambassador was whispering urgently to his aides. The Tessek were glowing with agitation. Even the Morvani, usually loyal allies of the Sindari, were looking at Voroth with new suspicion. This is a trick, Voroth said, but his voice had lost its certainty. A manipulation designed to divide us. No, Vasquez replied. It is the truth, something this council has avoided for far too long. Ambassador Kellis rose from her seat. Her voice cut through the chaos, clear and commanding. I call for a vote. The council must decide whether to examine the human evidence or dismiss it without consideration. All in favor of examination. The vote was overwhelming. Only the Sindari and their closest allies voted against. The evidence would be examined. The truth would come out. Voroth stared at Vasquez with hatred burning in his eyes. You have made an enemy today, human. The Sindari do not forget, and we do not forgive. Neither do we, Vasquez replied quietly. That is something you would do well to remember. The session ended in disorder. Ambassadors fled to their quarters to consult with their governments. Military commanders reviewed their deployments, uncertain whether they should prepare for war with the humans or rebellion against the Sindari. The careful balance of power that had held the galaxy together for millennia was coming apart, and no one knew what would replace it. Kethan watched from his observation post, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. He had never seen anything like this. The Council, that ancient institution that had seemed eternal and unchanging, was being torn apart by a single species that no one had known existed a week ago. He thought about what the human captain had said, about watching and waiting, about building strength in secret until the time was right, about protecting those who could not protect themselves. For the first time in his young life, Kethan felt something he had never expected to feel in the shadow of the great powers. He felt hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe the galaxy did not have to be ruled by fear and force. Maybe there was another way. He looked out the window at the stars, and somewhere in the darkness, he imagined he could see the human ship waiting, watching, ready, whatever happened next. He knew one thing for certain: the old order was ending, and something new was about to begin. In her quarters, Captain Vasquez reviewed the messages that had been pouring in since the council session. Dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, all reaching out in secret. Some offered support, some asked for protection, some simply wanted to know if the humans were real, if there was truly someone in the galaxy willing to stand against the Sindari. The sky above the Nexus station filled with ships. 800 Sindari warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons systems hot and their shields raised. It was the largest military display the station had ever witnessed, a show of force designed to remind the galaxy who held the real power. Ambassador Voroth stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human vessel had not moved from its position at the edge of the system. It hung there alone, a single point of light against the darkness. Impressive, perhaps, but no match for the combined might of the Sindari Armada. "Open a channel to the council station," he commanded. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." His communications officer complied, and Voroth's voice echoed through every speaker on the station and every ship in the system. "This is Ambassador Voroth of the Sindari Empire. The humans have spread lies and slander against our people. They have attempted to divide the council and undermine the stability that has kept this galaxy at peace for 5,000 years. We will not tolerate this aggression." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The human vessel has 1 hour to surrender and submit to Sindari authority. If they refuse, we will have no choice but to treat them as hostile invaders and respond accordingly. This is not a threat. It is a promise." The channel closed. Voroth turned to his tactical officer. "Deploy the fleet in attack formation. If they try to run, block their escape routes. I want them trapped." "Yes, Ambassador." The Sindari ships began to move, spreading out across the system like a net closing around its prey. Their formation was precise and intimidating, the product of thousands of years of military tradition. They had crushed countless enemies with this very tactic. The humans would be no different. On the council station, panic had given way to a strange kind of calm. There was nothing anyone could do now except wait and watch. The ambassadors gathered in the observation galleries, their eyes fixed on the tactical displays that showed the positions of every ship in the system. Kethan stood among them, his scales pale with fear. He had never witnessed a battle before. He had never even seen a military engagement larger than a training exercise. Now he was about to watch the most powerful fleet in the galaxy attack a single vessel, and he had no idea what would happen. Ambassador Kella stood nearby, her crystalline form still and silent. She had said nothing since Voroth's ultimatum. There was nothing to say. The decision was out of their hands now. "Look," someone said, pointing at the display. The human ship was moving, not retreating, as Voroth had predicted, not surrendering. It was moving forward, toward the Sindari fleet, accelerating steadily. And as it moved, something changed about its appearance. Panels along its hull began to open. Weapon systems that had been hidden beneath the armor emerged and extended, unfolding like the petals of a deadly flower. Point defense arrays, energy projectors, launch tubes for weapons that the Council's sensors could not even identify. The ship that had seemed merely large now revealed itself as something far more terrible. "Ancestors preserve us," one of the ambassadors whispered. The transformation was not complete. As the human vessel approached the Sindari formation, it broadcast a signal, a single pulse of energy, aimed not at the station, but at something beyond the system entirely. And the darkness answered. They came from every direction, emerging from faster-than-light travel with the precision of a perfectly coordinated dance. Ships identical to the Prometheus Rising, their hulls scarred by ancient battles, their weapons rays fully deployed. 10, 20, 50, 100. The count kept rising as more and more vessels appeared, filling the system with a fleet that dwarfed even the Sindari Armada. Voroth watched in horror as his tactical display updated. The numbers made no sense. It was impossible. No species could build so many ships of that size. No economy could support such a force. No population could crew them. But the humans had done it. They had built an armada in secret, hiding it in the dead spaces between stars. Waiting for this moment. All ships, hold position, he commanded, his voice cracking. Do not fire unless fired upon. Ambassador, they outnumber us 3-1, and their weapons are far superior to ours. If we engage, we will be destroyed. I know. Voroth closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, to face an enemy that could crush him without effort, that could end everything he had built with a single command. This was what the smaller species felt when they faced the Sindari. This was the fear he had inflicted on others for so long. Captain Vasquez's voice came over the open channel, calm and measured. Ambassador Voroth, your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot protect you. If you choose to fight, you will lose everything. But we did not come here for war. Then what do you want? Voroth demanded. We want you to choose. Peace or destruction. Reform or extinction. The Sindari have to paths before them. You can continue as you have, oppressing the weak, silencing the truth, ruling through fear. If you choose that path, we will stop you. Not today, perhaps. Not tomorrow. But we will dismantle your empire piece by piece until nothing remains. She paused. Or you can change. You can accept that the old ways are ending. You can work with the council to build something better. Something that protects all species instead of just the powerful. If you choose that path, we will welcome you as partners and allies. You cannot dictate terms to the Sindari. We are not dictating. We are offering. The choice is yours. The channel fell silent. Voroth stood on his command deck, surrounded by the symbols of Sindari power, and realized that all of it meant nothing. His ships, his weapons, his empire. It was all built on sand, and the tide had finally come to wash it away. Ambassador. His tactical officer said quietly, "What are your orders?" Voroth did not answer. He was staring at the tactical display, at the sea of red icons that represented the human fleet. Each of those ships was a death sentence waiting to be carried out. Each of them could destroy his flagship without slowing down. He had spent his entire life believing that power came from strength, that the strong ruled and the weak served. Now he understood that there was always someone stronger. Stand down, he said finally. All ships, power down weapons, and hold position. Ambassador, you heard me. We cannot win this fight. There is no point in dying for nothing. The order went out, and one by one, the Sindari ships lowered their weapons. The tension that had gripped the system began to ease. The battle that everyone had expected would not happen. At least, not today. On the council station, the ambassadors watched in stunned silence. They had expected destruction, carnage, the death of thousands. Instead, they witnessed something none of them had ever seen before. The Sindari had surrendered, without a single shot being fired. Without a single life being lost. Ambassador Callis was the first to speak. Captain Vasquez, this council owes you a debt that we can never repay. You have shown us what true strength looks like. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to offer mercy when victory is certain. Vasquez's voice came over the channel, warm but serious. We did not come here for gratitude, Ambassador. We came because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy does not need another conqueror. It needs protectors, partners, friends. Humanity is prepared to be all of those things. If you will have us, the council accepts, Kella said, and her voice carried a weight that went beyond words. Let this day mark the beginning of a new era. An era of cooperation instead of competition, of justice instead of tyranny, of hope instead of fear. The vote was held an hour later. Reform passed by an overwhelming majority. Only the Sindari and their closest allies voted against, and their opposition no longer mattered. The old order had ended. The new one was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. Trade routes were redrawn. Treaties were renegotiated. Species that had been oppressed for centuries found themselves free. For the first time in their history, the human fleet remained in council space, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Ensuring that the transition happened peacefully, Kethan was promoted. His work in detecting the human vessel had not gone unnoticed, and he found himself assigned to the newly formed Galactic Cooperation Initiative, a joint project between humanity and the Council to address the inequities of the old system. It was hard work, but meaningful. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was making a difference. On the day the Prometheus Rising finally departed, Kethan stood in the observation gallery and watched it go. The great ship turned away from the station and began its long journey home, followed by the rest of the human fleet. They had done what they came to do. Now it was time to let the galaxy find its own way. Before the last ship vanished into the darkness, a message arrived on Kethan's personal console. It was from Captain Vasquez. "Thank you for your courage. Thank you for speaking up when others stayed silent. The galaxy needs more people like you. Stay brave. We are not far." Kethan read the message 3 times, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Then he saved it to his personal archive, knowing he would read it again in the years to come.